In 2026, several cases of familicides, mass killings, and mass shootings were already being reported within just the first months of the year. Among them, one case in British Columbia stood out as especially devastating, so severe that officials later described it as one of the worst tragedies in Canada's history.
The people of Tumbler Ridge remain in a state of crisis following one of the worst mass shootings in our province's and country's history.
It raises a difficult question. How was one person able to take multiple lives in just a matter of minutes? And just as importantly, why did it happen in the first place? Tumbler Ridge sits in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in northeastern British Columbia. To get there, you drive more than an hour from the nearest city, Dawson Creek or Chetwynd, through open country that reminds you how vast Canada really is. The town was built for one purpose: coal mining. In the 2021 census, Tumbler Ridge counted exactly 2,399 residents. Everyone knows everyone. When an ambulance starts up, people take notice, not out of nosiness, but because the person inside might be their neighbor, their friend, someone they see every morning. A local business owner near the school described what it felt like to watch the events unfold from a few blocks away.
It's an incredibly small town. It's very close-knit. That kind of activity doesn't happen here very often. Like, it's the kind of town that if you hear the ambulance, start up, everyone perks up because, you just want to know what's going on and you worry about the people that you know because everyone here knows each other.
Tumbler Ridge Secondary School serves grades 7 through 12. In the 2025-26 school year, it enrolled 191 students, 191 kids in the whole building. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon in February, everything changed. Before we go any further, we need to stop here, because in stories like this one, the victims can get reduced to a death toll, to numbers that people compare and debate, and that cannot be allowed to happen here. 8 human beings lost their lives on February 10, 2026. Each of them mattered. Each of them was someone's entire world. Let's start with Takaria Lampert. She was 12 years old. Her mother, Sarah, had a nickname for her that says everything you need to know about who she was. Tiki, like a tiki torch, powered by love and happiness. When Sarah Lampert stood before reporters on a cold night in Tumbler Ridge, just 2 days after losing her daughter, she described a girl who was, in her own words, a dork of all dorks. A daughter who carried a mental Santa sack full of every bad dad joke you could think of. An Energizer bunny of talk, a kid who felt accomplished every single time she made everyone's stomach hurt from laughing. Kylie Smith was also 12 years old. She had been Tumbler Ridge's youngest competitive figure skater, giving her first performance when she was barely 3 years old. She had a gift for drawing. All freehand, her mother Desiree Pisarski said. Portraits, whatever came into her mind, all without a reference. Kylie had dreams of going to Toronto one day to study art at a proper school. Abel Mwansa was 12, Zoe Benoit was 12, Ezekiel Schofield was 13. 3 names that deserved decades more. 3 young people who walked through the front doors of their school on a Tuesday morning with no idea it would be their last. The 6th person killed inside the school was not a student. She was the adult in the room, the one whose job it was to show up for those kids every single day. Shanda Aviugana Durand was 39 years old. She worked as an education assistant at Tumbler Ridge Secondary School, the kind of school professional who fills the gaps, who sits with struggling students, who knows everyone's name. She was there because she believed in the kids in her care. She was doing her job when she was killed. 2 more victims were found not at the school, but at a home on Fellers Avenue, approximately 2 kilometers away. They were Jennifer Strang, 39 years old, and her son, 11-year-old Emmett Jacobs. They were the first to die that day, and they were the mother and half-brother of the shooter. And then there is Maya Gabala. Maya was 12 years old on February 10, 2026. She was inside the school when the shooting began and was struck multiple times, in the neck and in the head. She was airlifted that afternoon to BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver. Maya's aunt, Krista Hunt, spoke to reporters outside the hospital on the night of the shooting.
And then we got word that she was hit, and one of the shrapnels went in her neck and in her head. and she was airlifted from Tumbler Ridge to Vancouver Children's Hospital. And that's where she remains now, in critical care. So
Maya survived, but the injuries she sustained will be with her for the rest of her life. Doctors confirmed she suffered a catastrophic brain injury that will cause permanent cognitive and physical disabilities. In April 2026, after several surgeries, she was moved out of intensive care. She was 12 years old when her life was changed forever, and she had done nothing wrong. And if you're asking the same questions everyone else did right away, why did this happen? How did it even start? And what was the reason behind it? Those answers slowly begin to unfold as the story goes on. It all started on what seemed like an ordinary winter school day, Tuesday, February 10th, 2026. But at exactly 1:20 in the afternoon, 2:20 Mountain Standard Time, Tumbler Ridge RCMP received a call that would immediately shift everything. An active shooter reported at the secondary school. What no one understood in that first critical moment was something far more unsettling. The violence hadn't actually begun at the school at all. Police would later confirm that 2 people had already been killed at the family home on Fellers Avenue before the shooter arrived at the school grounds. Jennifer Strang and her young son Emmett were gone before the emergency alert was ever sent. It was a surviving family member at that home, a young child, who got out, went to a neighbor, and that neighbor made the call that brought police to the school. RCMP from the Tumbler Ridge Detachment arrived on school grounds within 2 minutes of receiving that call. That is not a number rounded for drama. 2 minutes is the official record. When they arrived, shots were being fired in their direction. But officers entered the school anyway.
I would like to thank the RCMP officers who were on the scene within 2 minutes of receiving the call. That speed and professionalism saved lives today.
Inside, they found a scene that no amount of training fully prepares you for. Not in a school this size, in a town this small, where the faces in the hallways belonged to kids everyone in the community already knew by name. Within minutes of entering the building, officers located the shooter. She had died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. 6 people had been killed inside the school. 27 others were assessed and treated for injuries. 2 were airlifted, Maya to BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver, and a 19-year-old student who was released 6 days later. By 5:45 that evening, RCMP lifted the emergency alert. The active threat was over. The town was devastated, and the question consuming everyone was the same. Who had done this? And could anyone have seen it coming? The following morning, Wednesday, February 11th, RCMP Deputy Commissioner Dwayne McDonald held a press conference in Surrey, British Columbia to formally identify the suspect. Her name was Jessie Van Rootselaar. She was 18 years old, born August 4, 2007, in Tumbler Ridge. She was also known by some as Jessie Strang, her mother's surname. McDonald stated that Jessie had been born biologically male but had begun identifying as a woman approximately 6 years before the shooting. RCMP identified her in the same manner she had chosen to be identified in public and on social media. Now, Jessie had dropped out of Tumbler Ridge Secondary School roughly 4 years before the shooting, meaning she had left the building she would return to when she was approximately 14 years old. At the time of the attack, she was not enrolled in any school or program. She was not employed. Her daily life, to all outward appearances, was lived largely online. A YouTube channel, now deleted, had been active for several years and focused on hunting, firearms, and outdoor life. A TikTok account used the same profile image across platforms, an anime-style character alongside a rifle against a pink and white striped background. That account contained multiple reposted videos referencing a transgender mass shooter who had killed 6 people at a private school in Nashville in 2023. On Roblox, the popular gaming platform, Jessie had created a simulation game set inside a shopping mall. The game involved shooting other players. Platform administrators later said the game had been visited exactly 7 times before it was removed following the attack. Police investigated her social media and digital footprint extensively. They found no evidence that any specific student at the school had been targeted. There was no known personal connection between Jessie and any of the school victims. The motive, as of the publication of this video, has not been formally established. What investigators did have was a paper trail, a documented history of warning signs stretching back 2 years, 3 distinct moments where a different decision might have changed everything. Because in the 2 years before February 10th, police had been called to the home Jessie shared with her mother on multiple occasions. The reasons, according to official records, mental health concerns, concerns about self-harm. On at least some of those visits, Deputy Commissioner MacDonald confirmed, Jessie had been apprehended under the British Columbia Mental Health Act, meaning officers believed she was at risk of harming herself and transported her for a psychiatric evaluation. The most recent of those contacts was, MacDonald said, sometime last spring of 2025, less than a year before the shooting. When a reporter asked directly at the press conference whether Jessie had been receiving mental health counseling at the time of the attack, MacDonald said he did not have that information. Whatever support was offered after each of those interventions, whatever follow-up existed, it was not enough to change the direction she was heading. Ironically, Canada's gun laws are among the strictest in the world. Firearms require licensing. Non-restricted weapons like hunting rifles do not need to be individually registered, but acquiring and possessing them still requires a valid license. And when police have reason to believe someone poses a danger, Canadian law gives them authority to seize weapons under the Criminal Code. That authority was used at Jessie's home. Within the 2 years before the shooting, according to RCMP, a police visit resulted in firearms being seized from the residence. The lawful owner, believed to be Jennifer Strang, Jessie's mother, who held a valid firearms license, petitioned for their return. The petition was granted. According to a relative who spoke to the Globe and Mail, those guns were returned to the home approximately 1 month before February 10, 2026. 1 month. The weapons recovered at the scene were not registered to Jessie, whose own miner's license had expired in 2024. Investigators continue to trace their origin, but the firearms had been assessed as a risk. They had been removed, they were given back, and 30 days later, they were used to kill 8 people. Honestly, this is the part of this story that has set off a legal and regulatory earthquake that may permanently reshape how artificial intelligence companies operate. In June 2025, 8 months before the shooting, Jessie Van Rootselaar had been using ChatGPT, the AI chatbot made by American company OpenAI. Over multiple sessions spanning several days, she used the platform to have conversations describing scenarios involving gun violence. OpenAI's own automated detection system flagged the account. It was routed to an internal safety team, approximately a dozen employees specifically tasked with reviewing users who may be planning to harm others. Those employees reviewed the flagged conversations. According to court documents filed in subsequent lawsuits, members of that safety team concluded that the account represented a credible threat. Some of them recommended contacting the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. However, OpenAI leadership said no. The account was banned. The conversations were internally archived. No call was made to the RCMP. No alert was sent to any Canadian law enforcement authority anywhere. Jessie Van Rootselaar then created a second ChatGPT account using a different email address. She resumed her activity. OpenAI's systems did not detect the second account while she was alive. It was only discovered after the shooting, when investigators were piecing together her digital footprint. The company shared the second account with law enforcement at that point. On April 24, 2026, 72 days after the shooting, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman published an open letter addressed to the community of Tumbler Ridge. He wrote, "I am deeply sorry that we did not alert law enforcement to the account that was banned in June. While I know words can never be enough, I believe an apology is necessary to recognize the harm and irreversible loss your community has suffered." Maya Gabala's mother, Sia Edmonds, responded publicly saying she did not accept it. "Did you use ChatGPT to draft your apology, Sam?" she wrote in a statement released through her attorneys. "It is empty, soulless, and lacks any human warmth. Only a machine could have put those words together and called it an apology. Tumbler Ridge sees your apology, Sam. We do not accept it." On April 29, 2026, 7 lawsuits were filed in federal court in San Francisco against OpenAI and its CEO. The plaintiffs included the families of the 5 students killed at the school, the family of Shanda Aviugana Durand, and Maya's mother. The suits seek more than $1 billion in damages. They also seek a court order that would require OpenAI to report identified violent threats to law enforcement, something the company currently handles on a voluntary basis with no external oversight. The complaint filed on Maya's behalf states, "The Tumbler Ridge attack was an entirely foreseeable result of deliberate design choices by OpenAI made with full knowledge of where those choices led." OpenAI has denied the core allegations, But a former member of the OpenAI safety division, Tim Marple, now co-director of Maiden Labs, a nonprofit focused on identifying AI risks, chose to speak on record. He said he was not surprised by what happened. "When I worked there and since I left," Marple told reporters, "the only things I can see characterizing their behavior are incompetence and greed." OpenAI, for its part, has said it has since updated its internal protocols. Under the revised threshold, the company says it would now contact law enforcement about an account like the one flagged in June 2025. That acknowledgement matters. It also arrived 72 days too late. British Columbia Premier David Eby said what many Canadians had been feeling since the ChatGPT details became public. "I think the part that is just devastating for me, for the families, for the people of British Columbia and Canada," he said, "is that this could have been prevented."
I'd like to take this opportunity to ask British Columbians, to ask all Canadians, to wrap the people of Tumbler Ridge, wrap these families with love. Not just tonight.
In the days following February 10th, Tumbler Ridge did what small communities do when the ground disappears beneath them. They held each other. A candlelight vigil was held at the community center, the same building where students had been safely evacuated during the lockdown just days before. Candles were lit for 8 people whose names the whole town already knew. Prime Minister Mark Carney canceled an overseas trip and ordered federal flags flown at half-staff for 7 days. The Canadian Olympic team, competing at the 2026 Winter Olympics at the time of the shooting, paused to publicly acknowledge what had happened at home. BC Public Safety Minister Nina Krieger announced that trauma-informed counselors were being deployed to the community immediately. A psychiatric liaison nurse was on the ground in Tumbler Ridge before the night of the shooting had even ended. "This is only the beginning for so many families who have been impacted," she said. "The shockwaves of this horrific event will continue to reverberate through the community and throughout the country for some time." The investigation was formally handed to RCMP Major Crimes. Authorities confirmed Jesse Van Rootselaar acted alone. There is no second suspect. The search for a definitive motive continues. 3 systems failed on the path to February 10th, 2026. The mental health system made contact with Jesse Van Rootselaar multiple times over 2 years. It intervened enough to recognize the risk. It did not provide whatever sustained, intensive support might have changed the outcome. The firearm system removed weapons from a home where a documented mental health risk was living and gave them back 30 days before they were used to kill 8 people. An AI company's own safety team identified a credible violent threat, recommended contacting police, was overruled by leadership, and stayed silent. Any one of those systems working differently might have saved 8 lives. All 3 failed in sequence. And the people who paid the price were young students who were 12 and 13 years old. A 39-year-old educator who showed up to work because she believed in the young people in her care, and a mother and her 11-year-old son who were killed in their own home before the community even knew what was happening. As of this publication, Canada has no law requiring AI companies to report identified threats of violence to law enforcement. That may change. Members of Parliament and BC legislators have publicly called for mandatory reporting protocols following the Tumbler Ridge lawsuits. OpenAI has voluntarily committed to establishing a direct point of contact with Canadian law enforcement going forward. The question of what happens to firearms returned in cases involving multiple documented mental health contacts is also under active review. In Tumbler Ridge, the long, uneven work of healing has begun. That kind of work never fully finishes, but the community is doing it anyway, together. Abel, Ezekiel, Kylie, Zoe, Tikaria, Shanda, Jennifer, Emmett, and Maya, who survived what should not have been survivable, and who as of April 2026 is out of intensive care and beginning the long road to rehabilitation. These are the names that matter. These are the names that should outlast this headline. The attack on February 10th, 2026 became the deadliest school shooting in Canada since the École Polytechnique massacre in Montreal in 1989, the tragedy that reshaped Canadian firearms law entirely, and that Canadians mark every year on December 6th as the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. Thank you for watching and for taking the time to remember these victims by name.